talking about channels of distribution here, which is the third P of marketing. Here, we talk about functions of channel intermediaries, which are basically, we talk about meeting needs of producers and consumers. We talk about improved accessibility. We talk about providing special services, sharing cost of inventory, and company representation. So when we talk about channel intermediaries, we talk about various channel what are the functions. Like for instance, a wholesaler has a different function, a retailer has a different function, uh, a sub retailer has a different function. So basically, at each level, or the functions of channel intermediaries have to be defined correctly. If you're buying a car, the channel intermediary there are different. If you're buying a soap, the different channel intermediaries are different. So you got to understand the functions of the channel intermediaries, meeting of needs of producers and customers. Basically, the needs of producers and customers have to be well defined when you are defining your channels of. There has to be improved accessibility in terms of goods and services. I mean, you are going into a mountain and still get a polo which is 5 rupees. I mean, there is someone who's talking about that logistics. Providing special services, sharing cost of inventory, and company's representation. They say a channel member is the ambassador of the company. He is the one who represents the company when you are buying the product from him as a consumer. So there is a company representation which he has, and he also shares the cost of inventory. Like imagine the entire soap, the entire cars, and the entire televisions. If LG has to pay or Livers has to pay, inventories will run into thousands and thousands and thousands of crores. They are all shared at different levels. The way the transaction gets completed at different levels of channel chain, and that's what you talk about channels of distribution. Clear, all of you? When we talk about distribution intensity, you have the intensive distribution system, the selective distribution, and the exclusive distribution system. When you talk about intensive distribution system, you talk about a distribution system whereby FMCG products is basically intensive distribution system where the channel members, let me see if I can write this down. Oh, there's no pen here that I can write it down, otherwise I would explain you on the screen on a whiteboard, but I'm sorry I will not be able to explain this to you. But intensive distribution is basically you have the factory, the C&F, the company warehouse, then you have the distributor, then you have the wholesaler, then you have the retailer, the sub retailer, and just the consumer when he buys the product. So intensive distribution system is a very long chain whereby the products that are sold generally have a very low unit value. It could be 5 rupees, it could be 10 rupees, it could be at best be 100 rupees or 500 rupees. But the chain is very long. The distribution chain is long, right? As I explained to you from, unfortunately, I'll not be able to write it down on a board for you. But then you have it, for instance, you have a very, very long chain. You have the selective distribution system whereby in a selective distribution system, goods like your televisions, goods like your washing machines, radios, mobile phones, they are all consumer durables. Yeah, it's the chain is, Augustine, the chain is from where the product travels and where it ends. It travels from the factory and ends at the consumers. So that is the entire chain is called the system of distribution. So in a selective distribution system, you have the manufacturer factory to the company warehouse into a state, from there to the distributor to the dealer. The dealer is generally the retailer. So the intensity is much low. And in exclusive distribution, for instance, buying a car, a Suzuki retailer, there's no distributor. Right from the factory, the car is delivered to the retailer showroom. So they are what you call exclusive distribution. A Toyota distributor will only sell Toyota cars. He's not going to sell a Honda car. A Suzuki car dealer or a Maruti dealer is going to sell only a Maruti. He's not going to sell a Bajaj scooter. So basically what happens is when you talk about the distribution intensity, you talk about a Frontier biscuits. Yeah, absolutely correct, Gauri. They are exclusive distribution systems, right from the factory to the retail counter. Nothing else. There are no intermediaries in between. But Britannia is an intensive distribution system. The product is the same. They are biscuits, but the distribution intensity changes. So are you all clear on this? I have tried to explain it very quickly and in a way so that all of you guys understand it well. Okay, good. We come to the next one. In distribution, types of distribution channels are, you have the consumer channels, you have the manufacturers to consumer channels are channels which are meant for consumer goods which consumers buy. Manufacturers to industrial customers, as I mentioned to you, selling of furnace oil, Indian Oil Refinery to a plant producing certain gases. They're having boilers. A plant producing pharma products, a plant producing steel. So the furnace oil goes from the factory to the Tata Steel. So they are industrial consumers. Sugar being sold to, as I mentioned to you, to a pharma company, to a company making biscuits. So they are manufacturers to industrial customers. Service channels are channels, courier services. They have their set of channel. I mean the various branches of, they are all what you call service channels. Transportation services are all service channels. Retailers are the ones who basically sell to a consumer, and wholesalers are one who sell to buy from the industry or buy from the factory and sell it to a retailer. So wholesalers are one who generally sell goods into large volumes and retailers sell it into per unit. This is very simple. I don't think so there is an explanation required for all this, but just for your understanding. Now, how do you select a channel? Channel, as I mentioned to you, channel, in the earlier slides that we have mentioned, channel distribution is a very important aspect. Selection of channel is a very important aspect of any organization. So when you select a channel, you look at marketing factors. Now, what are these marketing factors? The objectives of an organization to sell a product. Like what just Gauri mentioned. Frontier biscuits would only sell on an exclusive distribution system. They would not have dealers. Bata talks only about exclusive distribution system. So that's the marketing factor. There are objectives of marketing. Localized need of buyer. I mean, if your factory is in Mumbai, the consumer is not going to come to Mumbai to buy a product. He needs it locally. So if you are buying a bottle of Coke, or if you're buying a packet of biscuits, you probably need it in the neighborhood shop. If you are buying a car, probably you can move on to the next city also to buy it. So the localized needs of the buyers play a very important role in selection of a channel. What happens if there's for a consumer good, what's the localized need? Any one of you can explain it to me, please? What is the localized need for a consumer goods? Raincoats in Mumbai, yes, they are localized needs. Of course, raincoats are needed everywhere, but then the way the raincoats are distributed, they are sold into the railway stations. They are sold as you get out of the railway, local suburban trains. They are sold into malls. They are sold because this is something which is very, very handy. Okay, snow boots or something in hill areas, absolutely right. They cannot be sold into, they're a niche product which can only be sold. The need is into for a local need. So localized need of buyers is also an important aspect into channel selection. Willingness of channel members to market a product. Certain members would sell, the channel members may not like. For instance, everyone wants to be a Maruti dealer, everyone wants to be a Honda dealer, but no one wants to be certain dealers of small companies. So willingness of channel members, like I mean, generally livers dealers also, while it's a sort of dealership, but the Airtel promoting iPhone. Gauri, okay, anyway, I'll not get into a debate now, but doesn't matter. You have a point. I'm sure you would be having something. So willingness of a channel member to market a product is an important aspect of channel. Profit margins. If the profit margins charge given to a channel member is very low, he would not be very interested in selling the product. But at times they sell, like for instance, if a channel member is selling these Airtel, these connections like this, the prepaid connections, not the postpaid ones, he gets very little margin, he gets less than 1%, but the volume is very high. So that's the only thing that induces him to sell that. Suppose if they reduce the margins, like selling petrol, the margins are very low, but the volumes are very high. So profit margins at times, retail margins are generally very high. When you buy goods at the malls or when you buy it in any organized retail stores, the profit margins which these retail stores expect are generally very high because of the high overheads which they are carrying also. So profit margins also play a role in channel selection. Geographical concentration. You can have a dealership maybe for a Suzuki about 10 dealers in Delhi, but you cannot have 100 dealers in Delhi. So it depends on geographical concentration. You can have 3 or 4 petrol pumps in a row, but they have to be at a distance. Otherwise, it makes no sense. So geographical concentration also plays an important role in channel selection. So I hope this has been explained to you. And moving on to the next slide, please. Manufacturers factors, the factors that are responsible are the product factors, type of products that you are selling, and the competitive factors, which basically manufacturers also have to fall in line with competition if they are selling a product. So channel conflict. Now channel conflict is a very, very important aspect in marketing. Channel conflict basically refers to a conflict between various channel members. A conflict between the sales officer or a sales rep and a shopkeeper or retailer is a channel conflict. A channel conflict can also occur. For instance, that if you are a dealer for a person in Maruti, you have a dealership for Ghaziabad, you're trying to go and sell cars in Delhi. You're not supposed to be selling. That's not the area of sales. That's what you call a channel conflict. A channel conflict could be between the wholesaler and the retailer. So these conflicts have to be sorted out by training, by various other methodologies, because a conflict in channels at times can cause an effect on sales which a company is having. And therefore, it is extremely important to ensure that these channel conflicts are taken care of. Now, I am not vertical conflicts, horizontal conflicts, and multi-channel conflicts are basically vertical conflict is between two channel members. Horizontal conflict is between your staff and your between the staff, and multi-channel is between the staff, vertical and horizontal. So that's the channel conflict. Resolving a conflict is through partnership approach. This means all the channel members have to be trained. Training is a part of it. Is that yes, you are all partners you are all stakeholders in the company and in the organization, and therefore you got to support each other and work as partners instead of working as competitors. You have to do market portioning. This means you got to divide the markets correctly as to and divide the areas clearly. And most of the large companies, when they have the distributor or the dealers agreements, the area of territories are well defined. Improved performance. If an like for instance, if an organization, for instance, if a petrol pump is doing very well, he has no business trying to unnecessarily create a conflict with a neighborhood petrol pump of the same organization. Channel ownership. The channel member should be told that the ownership of the channel rests with them. So I'm quickly going through the resolving conflict. Channel management is selection. The management of the channel is selection of identifying sources, how to select them. You got to develop a selection criteria, which we know is by understanding the financial strength, understanding of what whether he's a competitor or whether he's got a dealership of competitors, etc., etc. What is the financial strength? What is his market ability? What are the resources he has? These are all aspects in developing a selection criteria. You got to motivate your channel members by different schemes. You got to train them, and you got to also evaluate channel members on periodical basis, and the ones which are not good should be thrown out, and the ones which you think have got the potential to grow should be retained, motivated, and trained to perform better and better. Now we come to advertising management, which is basically, now what is advertising? Advertising is any paid form of non-personal representation and promotion of ideas or services by an identified sponsor. The advertising, enhances brand equity. Now we know what a brand is. So when a brand has to be reached to a consumer, it can only be done through advertising. Advertisement also creates awareness among the consumers, and it helps in the buying decisions. I mean, when you're buying a product, you get influenced by the advertisement which you see. The 5 M's of advertisements are the mission, the money, the message, the media, and the measurement. The mission is basically what the advertisement, what is the mission of the ad. For instance, for some times back, when Coke had a problem because of, they said that there's contaminated with a lot of pesticides, etc., etc. Their mission was to see that the perception of a consumer in drinking a Coke is brought back. So there, the advertisements had, you must have seen, if you recall, they had Amir Khan, as trying to drink a number of bottles of Coke and saying that, nothing has happened to me, blah, blah, and all that. So basically, they wanted the consumer confidence back. And those ads are now out of the air because the mission has been completed. So there is a mission. There is money involved, of course. I mean, advertisements are not cheap. There is a message. The message has to be conveyed. There is a media through which it is conveyed, and after the media, there is, you measure the advertisement effectiveness. I wish I could give you the links for certain very good ads, but anyway, you can go to the YouTube and you can pick up ads and then try and understand the effectiveness of all this. Now, Brijmohan, I am going back on the previous slide for just a second for you to either copy it or take a screenshot immediately. Right. Okay. The 5 M's of advertisements, I have explained this through now. The advertisement objectives are basically positioning the offerings. Every product, has a position into the marketplace. At what marketplace you want to position, that is what the objectives are. You want to position Dove as a upper class, so the advertisements have to be made accordingly. Since the positioning of Lifebuoy is a little different, Lifebuoy probably sells more than Dove, but then the way the advertisements are made have to be based on the positioning. You got to create an awareness. Everyone should know. If there is a small, like for instance, if a company is giving a small matchbox with a pack of tea, Now the cost of that matchbox is less than a rupee, but they're spending crores of rupees on that advertisement because they want the consumer to be aware about a special scheme that is coming in. So basically the advertisement objectives are on creating awareness among the consumers. They stimulate a trial. A consumer looks at an ad and then probably wants to buy the product for purpose of trial. So he gets induced by the ad and then is also tempted to go to a dealer to buy the product. He may, for the purpose of trial. Remind and reinforce. Now basically you see a Coke and a Pepsi and a Surf ad coming in every 2 minutes in some channel or the other. Why? Everyone knows what a Coke is, everyone knows what a Pepsi is or what Surf is. They want to remind and reinforce to ensure that the brand, they want to hammer it into your minds so that you know what this brand is all about. It is also a support of the sales force. Brands which are well advertised, sales force can sell them well because it's all known there. Now, the message decisions are print advertisements, TV commercials, radio commercials, celebrity endorsements, and business advertising. Now, these are the message decisions. Media decisions are, when we talk about the print advert, what are the message, the way you want to either send the message by printing through a magazine or through a TV commercial or through a radio commercial, by having a celebrity, the way you want to give the message, certain products, like for instance, big brands like today, message decisions basically we mean is how you want to convey the message by making a film, by printing it on it, by bringing a celebrity. For instance, ICICI, because of the big brand, we all knew, we were studying, that there are some reference groups. So the way you want to convey the message to a consumer is what you call the message decision. Are you clear, Arun, on this? It's not a basically mode of advertisement is the media. The message is the advertisement itself. The mode of advertisement is the media. The message is the message decision. Like today, a film of an advertisement is a message. They say surf ki kharidari mein hi samajhdari hai is a message. So there's a film made. That's the message. So okay, fine. Anyone else has any queries? I mean, don't worry, we can just talk about it. So yeah, you can call it the punchline. Fine, Pranay, I agree. Or the tagline, you can call it anyway. They're all similar and all fine, sound the same. So okay, the media decisions are the creative factors, the advertising budgets, competitive activities, and retail trade influences. Medias are basically the way the message is conveyed. The media, it could be television, it could be print, it could be a radio, whatever it is. The creative factors are, advertisements are generally creative. They have certain matter into them. They need to be conveyed. Advertising budgets. The competitive activity, they depends on the advertising budget of which media to select. Television may have a very expensive media, so the advertisement budgets would not permit, so you probably go for a print media. Competitive, if your competitor is into television or if he's in print, you got to follow suit. Retail trade influence. Retail trade also influences companies, the type of media they select for them to support in sales, and that's the retail trade. Certain retailers may say you should have slides in the cinema halls, especially in the rural areas. So when a person goes to see a film, when he comes back, he gets influenced by the slides which are shown during the intervals. So these are retail trade influences which are there. So this is clear. Now media decision. We come to evaluating what is the advertising effectiveness. The effectiveness of the ad is basically when you see the ad, you get influenced to buy a product. Or when you see an ad, you suddenly understand the meaning of that. That's what you call advertising effectiveness. So what should be measured? the growth in sales, the growth in the viewerships, when and how to measure, the share of the cost, share of the voice, and share of the market. These are the various factors that are responsible in evaluating the advertising effectiveness. So we have done this on, we are now coming to innovations. We have about 10 minutes now for this class left. So we would just be doing this innovations. Innovations, so we have done the 4 P's. Now innovations basically means improvement in existing products or introduction of new products. Well, you see, you cannot be very effective in measuring effectiveness of advertisements, but certain parameters, like if there's a growth in sales because of this advertisement, if a consumer remembers that ad and talks about it, certain ads become very popular. That's what you mean effectiveness of advertisements. The trips ratings at times are also used. There are statistical tools to measure advertisement. We will not discuss this because advertisement is a separate topic in itself. So innovations are means improvement in existing products or introduction of new products. They mean evaluation of new product ideas and working with research. And see, invention is something which is new. Innovation is something which is already existing, but you improve on these. 2G to 3G is an innovation. 3G to 4G is an innovation. Improving a vehicle by putting in new features is an innovation. So the product is already there. A car has already been invented. You don't have to. It is just that you are innovating it and bringing it the features better. The evaluation of new product ideas and working with innovation can be only done by having new product ideas and working with research and development in every stage of development. Structure is through the product teams, product and brand managers, and the new product committees. Innovations are discontinuous innovation, continuous innovation, and dynamically continuous. Discontinuous innovations are basically, you discontinue a particular class of products and create something new. Okay, Brij Mohan, is this what you're looking at? The last slide? Quickly copy it down. We have only 5 minutes left for this class now. Okay, fine. Now, dynamically continuous are basically, there are certain improvements, like for instance, cars. They keep on doing innovations. There are either continuous innovations and dynamically continuous, like putting a GPR system in a car is dynamically continuous. I mean, there is something, which is much better than what it was in the previous model or in the car. I'm running a little fast now because the managing of the innovation process, discontinuous innovation, basically, Amrita, is you do a innovation for a particular period of time, then discontinue that innovation, and then after some time do a fresh innovation. That's what you call discontinuous. I mean, there is no continuity of that. There is a break, and then you start after a period of time. Planning. Well, we can at least 10 minutes more. We will continue, so don't worry. We'll try and finish as best as we can, because it's probably a last class. And but anyway, I have given you my mail ID. Anyone has any queries at any point of time is most welcome to call me and check with me at any on any issues which he has. I can also give you okay, so the mail ID is better instead of giving you the phone numbers. Managing the innovation process is through the product strategy. I mean, the product strategy comes with the generation of ideas. You see, they say a spark leads to a fire. Any small idea can tomorrow become a big idea. I'll just give you a story of 3M. This you must have seen those post-it papers. They were. It was an idea that was created by one of the marketers because the glue that was created by the research and development department was not the correct glue. So they were just trying to test that glue into these pieces of paper and throwing it in the waste paper basket. Someone picked up that waste paper basket, those papers, tried to use that product as a marketing innovation, and then that's what you call idea generations. Idea screening. Once you have an idea about a new product, all your internets, all your windows, all the telephones, there are all ideas which came into certain people's mind. Then you generate those, you do the screening of those ideas. You do a concept testing of whether that idea will sell or whether it will not sell. Is it marketable? It is not marketable. Then you do a business analysis of the whole thing. You do a product development. You do a market testing, and you do a commercial and diffusion of innovations. So once you have done the concept testing, you do a business analysis of whether that product will sell, how much will it sell. And if you are convinced that it will sell well, you do a product development of that product, or you make certain innovations on that. You do some test marketing in selling it in certain pockets. Get a feedback. If the product is not performing, you try and do some changes in that product. And then you try and commercialize the product and start diffusing the innovation in the minds of the consumers. So this is what the entire innovation process is all about. And innovation has become very, very important in today's world because of market dynamics. Markets are changing, they are very dynamic, and it's important that the producers keep the innovation process on. Diffusion basically means that the acceptance of the innovations by the consumers. You talk about innovators, you talk about early adopters. Early adopters are people who basically want to pick up a new product, like for instance the iPhone, which was made by Apple. Everyone wants to buy it. There are certain class of people. Early majorities are ones who probably, once the early adopters have tested the product, then they start buying the product. And late majorities are the ones whom then find that everyone has tested it, so they find that the product is okay, the prices also come down in the PLC curve, and then they do that. And laggards are the ones who buy the product while the product is almost at the end of the PLC curve or the product life cycle curve. So this is how the adoption and the diffusion process of innovation takes place. Now product replacement strategy is basically, in today's world, every product has to be replaced by some product or the other. And that's what you call the product, because you see there are continuous products that keep on coming in, and the consumer's mind is also changing. So you need to replace products to understand or to ensure that the consumer is not fed up with the old products. The ads are replaced, the products are replaced. So we're coming out with next generation products. And when we talk about disruptive innovations are basically, Maruti 800 being discontinued, otherwise the Alto will never sell. And a Premier Padmini, the company, according to me, is so you see what happens is you got to come out, because market dynamics are so fast these days. And then you talk about open market innovations, and you talk about experimentation in innovations. Open market innovations are basically innovations which are continuous in all respects and are important as a part of the market forces. We now come to competitive marketing strategy. I am giving you, the time is off now, but I am still giving you 5 to 10 minutes more because we are a little late also. So we will try and finish this off also. So the Porter's 5 forces models are nothing but the threats of new entrants, bargaining power of suppliers, and threat of substitutes, and the industry competitors. Now, Michael Porter, you see, he was one of the marketing gurus, and he had created this 5 force model. which says competition is because of threats of new entrants. I mean, if a company is making a product, there are new entrants into that product. There is bargaining power of suppliers. Suppliers also, have a lot of strong bargaining powers, especially in B2B companies. There are bargaining powers of customers. Customers are also very, I mean, this doesn't need to be explained. There are threat of substitutes. You are making a scooter, there's a bike that has come. Then you have something else coming in. So there are substitutes for every products. You have a petrol, then there could be a biofuel fuel, or there could be diesel, there could be gas. There are substitutes which gets, and those threats at times creates threats for a manufacturer, and therefore he has to fight out the competition. There are industry competitions within the same industry, within the same product line. There are industry competitors, and this is the 5-force model of Porter, which is called the Porter's 5-force model. We come to the competitive strategy, which is because of differentiation, because of cost leadership, because of differentiation focus and cost focus. Differentiation is because two different products, two different companies have got different ideologies. The product has got different features, and these create competition amongst each other. Cost leaderships. A company like Reliance, is strongly known for cost leaderships. They have costs which no other leader can match. That's what you call cost leadership. Differentiation focus talks about certain companies, want to make their products different. They want to do things which they feel that the competitors cannot do. And cost focus. It is extremely important to understand if companies have to remain in business, if they have to remain in competition, howsoever high the margins will be, they have to have a focus on costs. So this is on competitive strategy, and creating of cost leaderships is basically now creating cost leadership basically means how do you have you have economies of scales, you have learning about the product, you have capacity utilization. The more capacities that you utilize, the costs are much later. You have linkages with collaborators, stakeholders, which at times, for instance, if you have a good relationship with a supplier of raw material, you get your raw materials probably cheaper than what your competitor gets. So that's how cost leaderships are created. You have integration. Different plants are integrated into each other. So the economies of scale are integrated. The values of each plant are integrated with the other. Like for instance, if there's a steam there's a steam that is generated, the same steam gets used into there's a heat that gets generated in some plant to run a boiler. So you see, these are what you call integration facilities, which as a result, like you generate heat into a particular process, the heat is conserved and used to run a boiler as a source of energy. So these are what you call integration processes. Now timings, the time at what you can produce, the policy decisions of companies in having the basic idea of a company to have cost leaderships, and the location. Now policy decision is very, very important, and the location of the plant and machinery are also, or the plant is an important aspect of. Generally, if you are exporting a product, having a plant in a near a port gives you leadership advantages. Having a plant where your raw materials are close has got certain location advantages. So these are the cost leaderships. Now competitive behavior is because of conflict, it is because of competition, it is because of coexistence between various companies, cooperation and collusion. Now all these, a conflict between the organizations, a competition between different and a coexistence between two organizations and a cooperation, they all create what you call a competitive behavior. And marketing. So okay, this is where we will close today. The business missions, the purpose of a company, the strategy for which the company works at, the values of the companies and standards and behaviors are a part of marketing planning process. Now I have quickly run through these slides now. Now I hope we'll just finish the class now. Just 1 or 2 minutes more I can give you for any queries that you had on anything. So uh, okay, for to continue for a minute. Okay, fine, no problems. I don't mind continue for a minute at all. I mean, okay, fine. Let me give you 1 or 2 more minutes more, because the IT has to also. No problems. Now, marketing planning process is basically the business mission. There consists of the business mission which a company has in the marketplace. The mission which they have, a company may have a mission of saying that they want to have the entire market share. That's a business mission. The company may say that they will want to bring in an innovative product. That's a business mission. The purpose why the company wants to be into that market. Vodafone and all want to be into the market because they want to have a grip on the telecommunication markets. They want to also take a piece of the cake of the telecommunication market. There could be certain purposes. There is also a strategy on how to enter a market. Company values. Company values are basically, certain companies will not sell a product for less than a particular value. Like for instance, anything which is less than 500 crores or 300 crores, livers may not be interested in that product profile. So there are certain company values, and there are standards and behaviors which companies set for themselves. Like for instance, a company can say that at least 100% markup on the cost price is our standard of selling a product. And these are the planning processes worked out for any organization. The core strategies could be the target markets, the competitor targets, the competitive advantage, and the test of effective core strategy. When you talk about target markets, you talk about the markets which you want to target once you've segmented and you want to target. You also, the competitors targets are how to fight out competition. Competitive advantage talks about because of your large plants. Like today, Suzuki has a competitive advantage because their plants are well depreciated, as against Honda and Toyota, who have got newer plants and costly plants. Test of effective core strategy basically means that whatever the core strategy you found for that particular market, whether those parameters were tested, did you exactly get what you wanted? These are the tests of effective core strategies, which are a result of the objectives of top lines and the objectives of bottom lines which you have got on that product. So these are what you call the core strategies. I hope this is clear to all of you.